Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into one of the biggest stories in Formula One right now, Lewis Hamilton's start at Ferrari. It's been, well, challenging, hasn't it?
It certainly has. Highly anticipated, but definitely challenging. We've been looking through a whole load of notes, analysis, race commentary, basically trying to piece together what's going on.
Exactly. And our mission here is to kind of cut through the noise, pull out the key insights from all that material, and help you understand the real picture behind the results and, the driver sound bites.
Yeah, to give you that deeper understanding. Because when you start digging into the sources, it's clear this isn't just about, say, finishing P6 instead of P3.
Not at all. It's much more complex. We're seeing threads about fundamental car issues, setup problems, maybe even a driving style mismatch. Then there's a personal side, the pressure. It gets really, really interesting.
It does. So let's start at the beginning of the season, or rather, where we are now. 9 races in. This was supposed to be the dream Ferrari switch, right?
That was the narrative, definitely. But the commentary we've reviewed paints a very different picture, more like an emotional journey for Hamilton.
A roller coaster is the word used quite a bit in the analysis. Swinging, apparently, from these highs, like maybe that sprint win in China, right down to, well, utter dejection.
And Hamilton, he wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he? The sources highlight that he's probably one of the most, if not the most, emotionally expressive drivers out there.
Yeah, you really don't need to be a psychologist, like the analysis says, to read his mood after a tough race or qualifying. It's usually pretty obvious. And the point made recently is just how low he's seemed. Some commentary suggests he's looked, quote, more crestfallen than even at the height of his ground effect era struggles with Mercedes.
Wow, that's a strong comparison. Because he was visibly frustrated during those Mercedes years, wasn't he? Openly so.
He really was. So for the analysis to make that comparison now, it suggests the current situation is hitting him particularly hard. It's not just, a bad run of form. It feels deeper.
Okay, so let's zoom in on a specific moment the sources highlight. The Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona. Described as a weekend where the dejection sort of peaked.
That's the assessment, yeah. Barcelona seemed to be a real low point, visually and emotionally.
He finished 6th in the race there.
P6, yeah. But the crucial thing, repeated across the commentary, is that he finished behind his teammate, Charles Leclerc. And Leclerc managed to get onto the podium, which was seen as a bit unlikely for Ferrari that weekend.
Right, that contrast must have stung. And then there was that radio message on the cool-down lap. The analysis quotes it directly.
It does. You can almost hear the strain when you read it.
Mm.
He said to his engineer, Ricardo Adami, unbelievable, guys, something is wrong with his car mate. It's the worst it's ever been.
The worst it's ever been. That's a huge statement from someone with his experience. He's driven some difficult cars over the years.
It's incredibly direct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pure, raw frustration boiling over right at that moment. Not some measured technical feedback, just emotion.
Yeah, not holding back at all. And the analysis suggests this wasn't just a heat-of-the-moment thing, but really reflected how he felt about the car that whole weekend. A real disconnect.
That seems to be the interpretation, yes.
Yeah.
That the feeling was genuinely that bad for him in the race.
Okay, so let's dig a bit more into that Barcelona weekend itself, based on what we've reviewed. Beyond the P6 result, how did the performance actually look on track?
Well, it's interesting because Saturday, on paper, looked okay. The analysis points out he actually out-qualified Leclerc.
He did. That sounds positive.
Yeah, but it was only the second time this year he'd done it. And crucially, there's a big caveat mentioned in the sources.
Ah, okay. What was that?
Well, the commentary highlights that Leclerc apparently sacrificed his optimal qualifying strategy. He chose tires and maybe even a setup focus aimed more towards the race on Sunday, not just pure one-lap pace on Saturday.
I see. So Hamilton being ahead on the grid wasn't necessarily a sign that he was suddenly much faster over a single lap that weekend. It was strategic.
Exactly. That context is pretty important. So Saturday had that kind of asterisk. But then Sunday, the race, his assessment across the board was, well, pretty blunt.
How blunt?
Described simply as not good. And the commentary gives quite a few specific examples of why he seemed to be struggling so much.
Yeah.
Especially compared to Leclerc again.
Okay, what kind of examples stood out?
Well, it was noted Leclerc caught and passed him quite easily, relatively early on. His overall pace was just called comparatively poor.
Right.
And because of that lack of pace, the team actually told him to move over for Leclerc after less than 10 laps.
Wow, less than 10 laps into a 66-lap race. When he qualified ahead, That speaks volumes about the pace difference on Sunday, doesn't it?
It's a pretty stark indicator, yeah. And the struggles didn't end there. The analysis mentions he lost places to George Russell and the Mercedes later on.
Okay.
But maybe the most telling moment, the one that got a lot of commentary, was him being passed by Nico Hülkenberg in the Haas.
Passed by a Haas while driving a Ferrari.
Yeah. And the way it was described in some reports was vivid, like Hülkenberg passed him as if Hülkenberg was the one in the works Ferrari, not Hamilton.
Ouch. That comparison really drives home how severe the pace deficit must have felt or looked during that race. Losing out to a Haas like that, it just highlights how difficult that Sunday was.
Precisely. So those details from the sources really emphasize that the P6 finish wasn't just, an average result. It was a race where his actual on-track performance seemed genuinely problematic compared to his teammate and even cars you wouldn't expect him to be racing.
Now, moving on from the race itself, one of the really fascinating things highlighted in the material we looked at is this potential shift in Hamilton's own perspective after Barcelona. The analysis flags this as maybe the first clear hint that Hamilton was starting to doubt whether he was the problem, not just the car.
Yeah, this is a really key point that emerges. Now, Hamilton complaining about the car isn't totally new, is it? The commentary reminds us he definitely voiced frustrations at Mercedes during the tough times, sometimes hinting the car lacks something compared to his teammate then.
And the sources even mention an earlier example this year, right? Suzuka, where he apparently claimed some kind of unspecified deficit to Leclerc's car.
Exactly. So you could see the something's wrong with the car comment in Barcelona. It's just, more of the same. But the really pivotal moment, according to the analysis, seems to have come in that post-race TV interview.
The Sky Sports F1 interview with Rachel Brooks. How did the sources describe that exchange?
Well, based on the quotes and descriptions, when Brooks asked him what went wrong, his first answers were really short. Like, not particularly. It was just not a good day. He seemed like he just wanted to, get out of there.
Trying to shut it down.
Yeah. But as she gently pushed a bit more, the sort of dejection really came through. He added things like, "What do you want me to say? Nothing to say. Difficult day. Nothing else to add. Terrible. No point in explaining it. Not your fault. Just what else to say?" Reading that sequence, you get a real sense of just exhaustion, maybe. No, unable to even articulate it.
You can almost feel the frustration just reading those words. And Brooks picked up on it, didn't she? The analysis mentions her empathetic comment.
She did. She said something like, "It's hard to see you in this mood." And it was his reply to that, particularly when she added she hoped the team would find answers for him, that the analysis flags, and so striking. He apparently said, "I'm sure they won't. It was probably just me."
It was probably just me. Wow. From Lewis Hamilton, that's a powerful admission, or at least a powerful expression of doubt.
It really is. And the analysis jumps on the significance of that, interpreting it as, quote, "the first tangible sign at Ferrari of Hamilton openly pondering whether he simply lacks the ability to drive around the limitations of the car in the way that his teammate seems capable of doing."
That's a huge shift, isn't it? From focusing only on the car's problems to actually considering if his own driving, his adaptation, or maybe just his capability in this specific car is part of the issue compared to Leclerc. The sources see this as a really crucial moment in understanding what's going on.
It adds that layer of self-doubt, that introspection, which hadn't really been voiced publicly before in the Ferrari context, certainly not regarding his performance against Leclerc. It suggests it's maybe more than just frustration with the machine. It's a deeper personal struggle, too.
Okay, so Barcelona was a low point and maybe marked a shift in his thinking. But the source material also points further back to a specific technical reason why the car might be behaving so strangely and causing these setup issues.
Yes, that's a really key insight from the analysis. It suggests that, okay, at the start of the season, Hamilton and Leclerc were actually pretty close. Fairly evenly matched is the phrase used.
Right. Like in Melbourne. The commentary said the qualifying gap was only about 0.2, and it was mostly down to his struggles in just one corner, turn 12, suggesting the overall pace wasn't miles off across the whole lap.
Exactly. And then, China, you mentioned the sprint win earlier.
Yeah.
The reports also note he outqualified Leclerc twice that weekend. So things looked quite competitive early on, maybe even promising.
Until something changed.
Yes. And the material singles out that China weekend as the point where things started to go, quote, consistently wrong for Hamilton relative to Leclerc. And it links it directly to a technical incident. Hamilton's disqualification from the sprint qualifying results because of excessive plank wear.
Ah, the Plankler rules. The car scraping the ground too much, running too low.
Precisely. And the critical consequence, according to the sources, was that after this infringement, Ferrari basically had to change things. They were obliged to drastically change the set of parameters of the car for the races after that, just to make sure they stayed legal on plank wear. This is presented as the sort of technical watershed moment.
So, a rule compliance issue forced a big setup change, which then had knock-on effects on performance and drivability.
That's exactly the chain of events laid out in the analysis. They had to run the car differently to avoid breaking the rules again.
Okay, let's get into that setup change more. The sources offered some technical detail on how it changed and why that's maybe causing problems, especially for Hamilton.
Right. So the analysis explains the car now needs setting up in a way that even LECLERC has apparently described as really extreme.
Really extreme. That sounds difficult, like it's on a knife edge.
It definitely suggests it's not comfortable or easy to handle. And the technical explanation given is that the mechanical balance, suspension, springs, that sort of thing, has been pushed to essentially work against the aerodynamic balance.
So the aero is trying to suck the car down for grip, but the mechanical setup is sort of fighting that. Why would they do that?
Well, the stated reason, according to the analysis, is to try and get a better performance compromise across different types of corners, slow speed, high speed. They're trying to make it work okay everywhere, but the way they achieve that involves this. Let's call it a clash between the mechanical and aero philosophies.
Okay, so it's a compromise aimed at overall lap time, but it involves kind of fighting the car's natural tendencies.
That's the picture painted. And the direct negative impact noted is pretty clear. This approach has made the car significantly more challenging and less intuitive to drive since China.
And this is where it links back directly to Hamilton's struggles, this specific challenging setup.
Yes, crucially. The source material suggests this new way of setting the car up has moved the car further away from the kind of characteristics and balance that Hamilton needs to be quick and feel confident.